What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and we're back with the second episode of the Doug Polk podcast. We're taking a little journey through the world of cryptocurrency one day at a time. And I always let you guys know here on the channel that I am not an expert when it comes to the technology with cryptocurrency at all. And one of the reasons why I started this podcast was I wanted to reach out and find people that, really know a lot about what's going on, maybe some things more on the tech side, and also let people have a chance to speak their piece about what's happening in the crazy Wild West world that is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Today, I'm joined by a very good friend of mine. I've known this guy for a long time, worked with him over in poker. Now I'm working with him in crypto. So this is someone that's a very good friend of mine and also very knowledgeable when it comes to how Bitcoin works and also what's happening. So I want to go ahead and introduce my good buddy here, Jason Les.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be on. Pretty honored to be sandwiched in between all the great guests that you're getting on this podcast. It makes me feel pretty good about myself. But yeah, looking forward to having a good crypto discussion. We have all the time between ourselves personally. I think it's really cool to do it on a medium like this and, share it with the rest of the world, get other people involved.
Yeah, definitely, man. Actually, I got to give a little credit where credit is due here. So, I've been a Bitcoin owner for several years now. I bought my first Bitcoin, I think, in early 2013. But, I kind of just had them and I was doing other things, right? Because I was more using them for the functionality. When you're a poker player, being able to move money around easily is a pretty nice thing to have. Banks can't control your money. So, I had Bitcoin a little bit as an investment, but more to use it to transfer. And then, last spring, we were both in Vancouver. There's a tournament series that goes on every spring, and we're hanging out, getting some coffee. And then, you started talking about all these things that were going on, and it really piqued my interest to get involved and learn more and figure out about other currencies outside of Bitcoin, which is sort of funny because you are certainly a Bitcoin guy more than anything else. But, I didn't get into altcoins if it wasn't for you, man.
Oh, no. You can't blame me with that as well. Oh, my God. Yeah, you've definitely owned Bitcoin longer than I have. While I've known about it for a long time, I remember first hearing about it back in 2011. If people don't know, back in 2011, the Department of Justice cracked down on a bunch of poker sites, and it was really difficult for Americans to play poker going forward. And I saw someone mention this Bitcoin thing that people could use. And, I think my instinct at that point was just magic internet money. And didn't look into it too much from there. But then, in 2013, I heard a lot. I started to learn a lot more about it as the year went on. And, I wasn't in a great position to be investing in a bunch of different things, especially volatile things like Bitcoin in the midst of a huge price run up back then. But I did enjoy it a lot, and I did eventually start using it for the same reason as you. It's useful to use for poker. I think one reason that you see a lot of poker players happen to be early on in the Bitcoin space is that they were strong utility for Bitcoin. These are people that are not just using it, hoping the price gets up. They are taking advantage of the utility that Bitcoin offers.
And that's really, at the end of the day, always going to be an important aspect to a currency is actually using it. It's all great if it's a store of value, but one of the reasons why I've always been, a big supporter of trying to make sure that Bitcoin is usable as a currency is because that gives it more of a fundamental value that, then correlates to the price, right? And that's why when we saw the big run up with high transaction fees with Bitcoin, I was worried because I saw a lot of the people that were notable within the industry talking about how, guys, no, this isn't a problem. It's a feature. It's okay. It's expensive and slow because it's a store of value. And whenever I heard people in the Bitcoin community saying that, I just thought, man, how far up your own ass can you get to where you honestly think that this is a good thing for the current? Because there were people that said that, cheat. That actually happened.
So yeah, I mean, I understand that. I think the greater message there, I'm not trying to offend people that were just trying to say that $100 transaction fees or $50 transaction fees, $30 are good. I think the general point though that a lot of people were making is that it is not worth sacrificing the other valuable properties of the system just to get a cheap transaction fee. And I think that's the difference between a lot of Bitcoin people and then maybe other altcoins who think that cheap transactions, are the end all be all of what gives a cryptocurrency value. And like we must keep Bitcoin as cheap as possible to send, or it's going to fail. And while I agree that that's an important thing, and Bitcoin is achieving that, Bitcoin, for most notably through the Lightning Network, Bitcoin offers actually instant, not sitting in the mempool. We're going to hope that transaction is okay. Definition of instant some people like to use, but Lightning offers cryptographically proven instant payments for far sub penny prices. And so I think like working on those technologies and not sacrificing other valuable properties is important, because people could have like succumbed to the pressure. What if when Bitcoin fees were high in December, we decided community said, well, we got to do anything. We're jacking up the block size to a gigabyte just to get all these transactions. Okay, well, great. Transactions would be cheap, and there'd be a ton of consequences to doing so. So while I agree with you, I think what we've seen is, progress in the system in like a real short period of time. Like, I don't know if you've seen the average fees on Bitcoin now compared to 2 months ago. It's insane.
Dude, I had to send a transfer the other day, and I like looked at it, and I looked at it again, and I was like, wait, is that a real number? Like, it's that low? Because it's so cheap now.
Yeah. And well, it's not just that. I mean, I think there were a bunch of factors at play that were making transaction fees high. I think there's reasonable certainty there was a spam attack going on. There was a bunch of major providers to Bitcoin service that were not properly utilizing Bitcoin features to make transactions cheap. And, in the sense that is spam, like if a company is utilizing 50% of block space and they're doing it very inefficiently, it's kind of like they're spamming the network. I don't know. The definition of spam varies amongst a lot of people. But another big thing that I've tweeted about a lot is fee estimation. A lot of wallets and exchanges, merchants were incorrectly estimating fees. And it was just yesterday I tweeted out a guy I actually met through Bitcoin and poker. I saw him at a Bitcoin conference. I also seen him in poker tournaments. And he made a fee estimation tool. His name's Felix. And I tweeted out the link. And you can go on there and you look, and you have a table to see what kind of fee you need to use for a percentage-based chance of making a transaction confirmed in a certain amount of time. So, it's hopefully this technology is implemented in wallets, or people come up with other fee estimation solutions in the future to make users not have to overpay fees. But until then, if you're willing to mess with a custom fee, which does have its risks, so people should be careful, tools like this are a great help for saving everyone money.
That's true. We have a few different topics I want to jump into, but just to answer that, so that's definitely true. Although I can understand from the business point of view that you don't want to be paying money so your customers can send money. So I understand wanting to be higher and also making it so that it's 100% to go through. I think if you made it too cheap, or you made it so there's a few percent to not go through, or you made it so you might be paying the fees, I can certainly understand as a business not wanting that to be a problem.
Sure, yeah. For we're talking, if we're talking about a small bunch of percentage, but there's another website I tweeted out before, and the name of it escapes me, but you can see service providers like Coinbase charging 80% too high of a fee. That's not like that's not like a safe extra fee to make sure the transaction goes through. That's just bad. They weren't batching transactions. They weren't utilizing segregated witness, which I believe they're now beta testing, so that should be out soon. But and even beyond that, I don't think their wallet, they were estimating fees. All that stuff aside, they were not estimating fees correctly. There's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can look at the mempool. You can look at what fee-paying transactions have been included in like recent blocks. It's a really difficult thing to figure out. It requires good engineering. So I hope they work on that as well going forward. Any big Bitcoin service provider, I think everyone's interest is aligned. If you are a business that uses Bitcoin, you should want a customer experience to be as good as possible. so people enjoy Bitcoin. The only thing is maybe that business provider likes some other altcoin instead of Bitcoin, and maybe they have a vested interest in making Bitcoin look bad. I don't know, but hopefully the incentives work out correctly there.
But how are exchanges supposed to make any money if they can't have 80% extra transaction fees?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that exchanges are making money on transaction fees. I think exchanges, they're making their fees on mainly on commission for doing trades. Maybe some fees. To be honest, like I don't deposit and buy.
That was a joke. It was a joke.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. So you've alluded to it several times already. So we're gonna jump into it. And you are not a man who likes the Bitcoin Cash. Okay. I understand that. I know that.
Well, it's not okay. Keep going.
Hold on. Hold on. Just I'll let you speak your piece.
Okay.
So I know you don't think that solution long term is viable. You've already talked about raising the block size and already talked about people's interests with altcoins. So I know you're strongly getting at it. So we're going to get there. But before we do, I want you to say one good thing about Bitcoin Cash. One good thing. I know you can find one.
Well, okay. I was trying to initially was going to go to try and clarify my position. Okay, I would say
one good thing.
The good thing about Bitcoin Cash, and this is ignoring all other properties of the system, would be that it does have low fees right now. Okay, but I think the cost they pay to get those low fees is, I think they pay a very high cost of centralization, and that leads to less censorship resistance. And I think they have Bitcoin Cash as a less. It does not benefit from the same advanced and developing features that Bitcoin has. And I am cool with anyone wanting to start their own altcoin or fork off from any blockchain, Bitcoin included, to make their own coin. That is the nature of blockchains. Anyone is free to do that at any time, and no one can stop them. That's why there's already a fork off of Bcash. We got Bitcoin Classic, which is Satoshi's original edition, which includes the emergency difficulty adjustment. So that's Satoshi's original edition. My main gripe with Bitcoin Cash is that this whole "we are Bitcoin" thing and this whole like battling Bitcoin, like misinformation back and forth. Just people should be competing. Altcoins, whatever, can compete on their own merit. It shouldn't be this whole like propaganda campaign and media campaign and we're gonna get like half naked girls and spray paint like BCH on them and send them to conferences. Like I mean, I guess they can do that, whatever. Like it's just compete on your own merits and don't go on podcasts and say Lightning Network is great and then don't 6 months later say Lightning Network's the worst and then make up lies about Lightning Network, lies about segregated witness, lies about how Bitcoin development works. It's just that's not cool. Just people, in my opinion, should just be competing. Technology can compete on its own merit, and all this colorful extra dancing media, whatever, it's just I don't know. I don't think it's important.
I think you're kind of cutting into sort of the problem with maybe not just the Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash argument, but sort of the altcoin culture in general. Because when you look at what stuff succeeds, what stuff ends up being worth a lot more money, it's not really as much tied to the tech. It is loosely. I would say, generally speaking, the better, more sound projects tend to make it to the top. But marketing and promotion and reach and really, just building that culture within a community for that currency is so strong that that's actually maybe even more important than what the currency is itself.
That's what it does appear to have a strong short-term impact. I think a most notable example of that would be, although I'm not an expert with it, is Tron. Like Tron does nothing. They've just announced partnerships that not really sure if they're real or not or whatever yet, right? I mean, I don't know anything about their project. That's just what I know from watching your channel. So Is that the case? Do you know? I don't know.
I saw on the Tron subreddit a thread very angry about what I have said about Tron and making it a running joke. And I just want everyone here to know that joking about Tron is not funny.
Okay.
Do not joke about Tron. Okay, I just wanted everyone to know so we're cool again.
So,
But yeah, I mean, like the thing about Tron specifically is that I don't know a ton about it as well. I know they had the white paper fiasco where it turned out a bunch of their stuff was just directly ripped off,
whoops.
and then the language in it where it talked about the phases and what they're trying to do. It's just like an absurdly ambitious project in my not developer view of what they're trying to do, that's trying to just do so many different things, kind of an all-in-one coin, if you will,
Yeah.
that it's like, okay, here's our plan over the next 5 years, guys, and it uses all of these like terms like Odyssey and like legacy or whatever, and I just look at that and then look at like all of the hype, and I look at the kinds of people that were promoting it, and I look at like what they actually have today, and to me, it's funny. It's at least funny, if not bordering on I don't want to say anything too negative, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I would also like. I don't want to give a strong opinion about Tron and the fact because I haven't reviewed the material myself yet. But what you're talking about reminded me of your video with the what is it, RJ's business or something, or JR's business, and they're like going through the different coins, and it's like, and then we got Tron, and they're doing everything, so they can do everything. That's gonna be really big. It's like, I guess, yeah. What
Are
they
they
do everything, that's gonna be big. Are we
are
really
they wrong? Are they wrong?
No, they're right. If it does everything, that'll be great. But I forgot who tweeted this, but I thought it was a really good point. I don't like often when people compare Bitcoin to the .com area because they're just trying to call it a bubble the same way. And maybe there are some similarities in price action there. But what this person tweeted out was pointing out that .com bubble showed how inefficient the market was at valuing, good technology. There's tons of awful companies then that were valued super high. You kind of had Amazon and Google just kind of chugging along there, and people think Yahoo's going to be the future. And in the long run, we saw what businesses with good practice, good strategy, and tech were able to succeed. A lot of people thought like Google was a joke 20 years ago, like, oh, how can they like categorize searches just without humans telling them what to do? It's never going to work, blah blah blah. So that's why I think in the short term we see dramatic price fluctuations all over the place. Altcoin goes from sub 1 cent to $3, everyone goes crazy, but in the long term, this is a free market, and I believe free markets work efficiently. So in the long term, all this stuff will play out fine. And that's why, while I'm not a financial advisor, blah, 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 when people ask me about investing in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I'm like, this is a very risky business. And I would suggest you invest a reasonable amount you can afford, and you have to think for the long term, because it's going to take a long time for this stuff to play out. There's going to be a lot of volatility. All sorts of stuff can happen. So in the long run, yeah, we have ripples at hitting $100 billion market caps or whatever they reach. In the long run, I think the best technology will be priced accordingly.
Totally agree. You have to wait until at least March, maybe April, to know that your investment has been you've made a smart investment.
Yeah.
No, but I really like that comparison, and I don't often say that about .com comparisons.
Yeah.
But I really like the comparison because that was exactly what happened with the .com, bubble. Was the bad companies got weeded out, the pets.com or whatever the ones that
example, yeah.
What people love talking about, the same ones, and that's going to happen. We're going to see the ripples of the world, if you will, eventually get weeded out, and I hope, but eventually get weeded out, and we're going to see the stronger tech end up winning in the long run. But it also really matters what people want to use. And when you think about Bitcoin's doing a lot of great stuff right now to further itself on a technological front, to lower transaction fees and speed while not sacrificing security. But at the same time, it is still tied to this very primitive tech. Bitcoin was the pioneer. Bitcoin started it's blockchain 1.0, right? This is like the start of what we have today. So do you think that if you believe, then kind of going with the same analogy, that the stronger, tech wins out, does that not worry you about some of the competing currencies to Bitcoin if it is kind of like the .com era?
No, because I think Bitcoin is the strongest tech. I think uh, Bitcoin has the strongest development in the industry, and that's what secures Bitcoin, and that's what makes it adaptable and evolving going forward. I think Jimmy Song, who was the great podcast you had last week, he has a video on the anti-fragility of Bitcoin, and that's one of the things he talks about, how he was considering what makes Bitcoin so strong. And it is because it has the strong network of developers that are able to address issues and able to safely, soundly engineer the tech going forward. I think there's a big difference, though, I think basically you have to look at everything together. So when people look at Bitcoin, I hear this common criticism all the time. Bitcoin's MySpace, and then whatever, Ethereum's Facebook, whatever. Or how do you know something's not going to come along better than Bitcoin? Well, in open source projects that are controlled by its users, these things are able to adapt however they need. They're able to add the good tech that's developed. The difference between Bitcoin and other altcoins is they don't just throw shit against the wall and just hope it sticks and just mash a bunch of hammers and levers and, oh, look, we got this new thing, it's better. It's very safe engineering that goes into play there to make it have 99% uptime, make it never be hacked or have any sort of security vulnerabilities. And people like to point out Ethereum. Oh, Ethereum's the future because smart contracts and DApps, whatever. And Ethereum does have some compelling use cases, but as strongly as that's developed, how many hacks have there been related to that? I don't see the same careful engineering principles that were applied to Bitcoin being applied to Ethereum. And once again, I know there's lots of Ethereum fans out there. I do see compelling use cases for Ethereum. There's stuff it could be used for, but if you want to use it as a store of value system, if you want to use it as like a financial network, you're going to have to make it so $200 million contracts can't be deleted with a few lines of code some dude on the internet figured out.
Well, all right. So I obviously agree with that, but I also feel that it's a little bit too pro Bitcoin from my standpoint to just say Bitcoin's the best and these other guys are unproven. Okay, well, can you really say it like that? Can you really put like the IOTAs of the world in with the Litecoins? Can you really put the Trons of the world in with the Moneros? Can you really put those together?
Yeah, I mean that's true. What I was referring to is these coins that come out and they are marketed as all the features in the world that make it so great. I think there are good alt projects, Litecoin being one of them, Monero being another. Two you mentioned are two strong coins, and they compete. They offer something slightly different than Bitcoin, but they do make trade-offs to achieve that. And a lot of people in Bitcoin maybe don't think those trade-offs are necessarily worth it. So it's not, I would not go ahead and say like Monero is like better tech than Bitcoin or Litecoin is better tech than Bitcoin, which some reason people believe, even though Litecoin's a lighter weight version of Bitcoin, people think it's better tech. I don't understand how that happens.
My understanding was Litecoin was better tech. I'm serious. I thought that they took the Bitcoin code and changed a few things that were like things that were sort of drawbacks to Bitcoin, and they implemented that. But the thing is, it's not disruptive in any way. That's my understanding with what Litecoin has done.
Well, I think better is a bit subjective. What they did, they removed features that made Litecoin like maybe a lightweight, faster version of Bitcoin. They changed the block interval time, which I've seen people just tout as a technical accomplishment, but actually all it is changing like one number, or so it's not. So I mean, the blocks come every 2.5 minutes, but there's consequences to that.
Can you actually expand on that? Really, I'm actually interested in what you have to say. So, because I've heard about that before, And whenever I see that, it sounds like it's better. Why would it not be better for blocks to come at a quicker speed? What are the drawbacks to that?
Okay, yeah. So it's funny, like people compare Litecoin to Bitcoin and that, and they're like, oh, Litecoin 2.5 minute block intervals, Bitcoin 10-minute block intervals, it's faster. Well, there's trade-offs you make in picking that interval time, whether it be higher or lower. And the main trade-off you make with this low block interval time is it can lead to a lot more orphan blocks. Blocks will not necessarily propagate through the entire network fast enough for everyone to agree on the longest chain. So you can't always rely, like there can be reorganizations of the network a lot more easily. You're not, miners or nodes can't always confidently know they're on the longest chain until, maybe several blocks have passed. And even then they may not be on the longest chain from that point forward. So I would say, in short, that block interval time, the lower you go, the less sure you are that all nodes on the network will have the latest blocks and necessarily know what the longest chain is.
Right, and that could potentially lead to double spend problems.
Yeah, that could lead to double spend problems if you pay a merchant and you send your transaction to you're sure it gets to their node, and then you have another node on the network that's maybe far removed in connectivity, and you send yourself the same coins and essentially double spend. They could accept your payment as valid, and then maybe their chain doesn't get extended, but you're already gone with whatever goods you paid for. So I would say that yes, it makes double spending more likely.
Have you ever heard of any of these issues happening on the Litecoin network?
I have not heard. I'm not trying to say anything negative about Litecoin. Like I think it accomplishes. I think Litecoin is great for payments, particularly smaller payments. And I cannot tell you an example of that happening, mainly because most merchants don't rely on zero confirmation transactions. So if you're a merchant, you're waiting for a transaction to be included in a block and several blocks to happen after that, you don't have to worry about this double spending as much. And I think, especially with a 2.5-minute block interval time, like merchants are a little more, they're willing to wait longer, even though it's not like a lot of times Bitcoin, you deposit on an exchange, they might make you wait 3 blocks. With Litecoin, I've never deposited Litecoin, or haven't deposited Litecoin to exchange in quite some time, so I don't know what most exchanges require for confirmations yet, but I mean it's higher than 3. So if merchants are being safe and properly utilizing Litecoin, I was about to say Bitcoin, but I mean the same thing, properly utilizing confirmations of a blockchain, they don't have to worry about that kind of problem.
I see. So if you have a lower block time per block, then you have to wait for more confirmations or to make the transfer, so its effect is like relatively similar.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Ethereum have 30-second block times, right? So, but if you fire out, no one's going to accept the one confirmation Ethereum transactions. I hear people complain about blocks getting orphaned there all the time, and block getting orphaned means that it gets built on, and then that chain's not extended, and that block, is discarded by the network. So at that point, you could not rely on any transactions that were in that block. So yeah, the lower block interval time doesn't necessarily mean that these transactions are getting through faster. It just means the blocks, you can't rely on them faster. The blocks are just happening faster, which is an important distinction to make.
Okay, cool. That actually was really informative. I learned something there.
Yeah. I mean, but there's other. I couldn't tell you all of them offhand. There's other trade-offs. There's other benefits as well. But I mean, that's what engineering is, particularly in cryptocurrencies and blockchains. There's design decisions you make that have consequences in each direction, and it's about finding the right balance of those and having those things appropriately considered by its users and its development community.
All good stuff. Now, before we continue today, I want to quickly remind you guys, if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. This is going to be the home for my cryptocurrency podcast. hoping to get Charlie Lee on at some point, said he'd be in for a pod, maybe a few other guests coming up down the road too. So make sure to subscribe and check out the pod in the future as well. Also, some people thinking this is pre-recorded. Hassan Mukhaled, can't pronounce that, looks pre-recorded. It is not. We are live, my friend.
How do you prove you're live?
Confirmed.
I'll show you.
So you think then that the technology with Bitcoin is currently, I guess, better than everything else that we have out there. But, there are a lot of upcoming projects that are doing, very revolutionary things should they be successful. Like, for example, we look at IOTA, and IOTA's got its own issues. I think I saw Richard Hart in the chat here, and it made me think of IOTA. I now think of Richard Hart as the face of IOTA.
Definitely an IOTA hater, yeah.
But they're trying to do something, really revolutionary here by removing the fees. Now, I know that, and I'm sure you're going to argue that you need fees to secure the transactions, and that, Tangle's unproven, and IOTA's had all kinds of problems out of the gate. But let's just say that they end up being successful with something like that. That seems to me like it could be much better than Bitcoin. Would you agree with that or no?
Well, I don't know how you define success. So first off, there's a couple issues here. You started off with the fees. I'm gonna get to the bigger one, but you mentioned the fees. Now, I guess this might be going back to Bitcoin a little bit, but fees are what pay for the security of the network. Presently, miners are subsidized by the block reward, the reward they get for each time they find a block, and that goes down every 4 years. When Bitcoin first launched, the block reward was 50 Bitcoin, and you can mine it on your computers. Imagine that. Imagine just firing up your home laptop and mining Bitcoin, and you're just like getting 50 Bitcoins here and there, which is now like almost 600,000. So you need these fees unless you're going to have inflation forever. These fees are eventually what pays for the entire security of the network. These fees are what incentivize the miners to mine. And I think a lot of altcoins, let's just say, for example, Bitcoin Cash, when their goal is every fee is going to be sub penny. Well, when the block subsidy runs out, the block subsidy will be almost completely done by 2040. Okay, so you don't even have to wait till 2140, whenever it is. By even just 20 years from now, most of the block subsidy will be gone, and miners will have to be getting paid solely out transaction fees. If every transaction is less than a penny, you are going to need to be like the payment source in the world that everyone has to be using, or you will not be able to pay for the security of your own network. And I think that sets a bar extremely high, and it basically sets up a coin to fail unless it is the world future payment period. And that's not guaranteed whatsoever. So I don't know what IOTA's inflation schedule system is. I don't know what their fee whatever is. But my point is that simply claiming lower fees isn't necessarily a good thing when you consider the entire lifetime of the currency. But the bigger issue is, and I think this applies to almost all alts, especially even ones that you might be able to say objectively have better tech than Bitcoin, is that they are all very centrally controlled. And they don't stand a chance to compete unless they are centrally controlled. They need marketers. They need people forming partnerships. They need people in charge of deciding where the development goes. That's the only way these coins, have the prices and market caps that they do. And Bitcoin doesn't have that. You might be able to say, I think there's a compelling argument to make that Bitcoin is the only decentralized cryptocurrency. And I think people undervalue that a lot. I think people just see the stuff going on today and think this is a race to make the best tech. The reason Bitcoin was created was to have a financial system outside of the hands of governments and central banks. And, we haven't faced the threat of a third party like that, or a cartel of third parties like that attacking to try and control Bitcoin in some way. But that's a real threat that could come if Bitcoin does what it's trying to do. Like, that's a real threat that can happen someday. And I believe the way the system is designed, it's able to resist that. And I don't think you could say the same for other coins. There's no one in Bitcoin you can go to and say, you know, put a gun to their head and be like, you need to block gambling transactions, or that's it. A lot of these other coins you can. And, you know, it might not happen that way. Governments and business can exert pressure in other ways. They can, you know, kind of just convince you to do stuff. That's why it's a real problem. If there's someone that can make a powerful decision, in my opinion, that's a problem, because the stakes are so high, they can be co-opted.
It's weird when you said that. Echoing. Hello.
Hello. Is it okay?
I started echoing. Hello.
It's the remix.
I think I'm good. So when you said that it's the only one that you can make a case, it's the only coin that isn't centralized.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked and I thought about it. And I was like, there's no way that can be true. And then I look at the list, and man, times have really changed over the last couple of years. The top whatever list has drastically changed, and there's only really a few players that are still there. But you know, I just don't think you can say that Litecoin is centralized. I don't think
I would actually. So the two examples I was going to go back to that, you know, maybe are not so centralized.
ETC, right, and Litecoin.
Litecoin and Monero.
Oh, Monero. Okay.
Okay. I mean, Monero has a pretty large development community. I don't think Fluffy Pony is necessarily the end all be all of control there. They have a, you know, pretty good distributed system. I think it's resilient against an attacker for trying to, you know, take over the protocol somehow. But Litecoin, I think they also have a good development community. I would be curious, like I hope you have Charlie Lee on, because I would be interested to know what does he think his power is in that community. Because, you know, there could be a perception that people, they'll do whatever Charlie Lee says in Litecoin because he's like such a big figure. You know, I would be curious to see, like, especially now since he sold all his Litecoin, what does he feel like his power is in that community? What does he feel his role is? And yeah, I think that's an interesting topic for him.
Totally agree. But when I look at the rest of these, yeah, these are almost all just completely centralized. Do you worry about the direction that you think cryptocurrency is heading? Because when you think about, when I think about it, when I first started, right, it was decentralized peer-to-peer currency.
Mm-hmm.
And as it changed and became more of store value, and as more and more became centralized, it wasn't really as much like that anymore, with the exception of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was going through a lot of problems up until the last month or two, and the mempool finally was cleared.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing Lightning implemented all this stuff. So do you worry that maybe a lot of the people that are new to cryptocurrency or starting to jump in or invest or like the technology, that they're maybe not getting into it for the same, I guess whether it's the right reason or not is debatable, but the same reasons as some of the early founders?
Well, I don't know if that should necessarily worry me. I think that's definitely the case. I think people undervalue centralization and censorship resistance quite a bit. I think they undervalue development quite a bit. But I think there's a lot of people that have been just getting into cryptocurrency just to get rich. They don't, you know, maybe they don't understand the system, or they don't really think it's that interesting, or they don't value maybe the same things I do. And by the way, there's nothing to say that I'm right. Like, you know, this is my belief. I think this is what gives a cryptocurrency, like, you know, Bitcoin, its value. But, you know, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I would say that I would be worried that a lot of people are going to lose money, you know, investing in all these things that are ultimately going to be nothing.
So no cheap hot alts.
No cheap alts. I'm not saying every altcoin is bad. I think there's altcoins that, you know, address different use cases. Once again, so, you know, I think Litecoin's addresses the use case of, you know, a lot of smaller payments, and, you know, Monero addresses privacy issues. But there's other coins, you know, like Wax or whatever, that does different things. But, you know, I've heard these coins that I see that are like actually trying to compete with Bitcoin as the foundation of like the future financial system. I don't think they really are competing if they are essentially controlled and they don't value those properties.
When you look at the top 5 or 10 coins, they're all really trying to compete for different sectors of the market, which you can do in a market that's this large. So I think we should talk about just the ones that are going after, decentralized platforms for applications. Obviously, Ethereum, Neo, I believe Cardano to some extent as well. So yeah, I wouldn't say that those platforms are competing with Bitcoin per se. They're trying to do something completely different. Sure, you could look at coin market cap and be like, oh, Bitcoin's 1, Ethereum's 2. They're like neck and neck, or whatever you'd want to say to make yourself feel like it's a competition.
The flippening.
But it's really not a competition, though, right? These are really trying to.
I would say that I think a lot of people do view Ethereum and Bitcoin as competition. I think there's a significant amount of people investing in Ethereum thinking that it will overtake Bitcoin because it has all these extra features. You can do more with it, with this world computer platform. But I think and personally, I view it as a different kind of thing. I view it as addressing different problems.
But the idea of it does seem very useful, right?
Sure. You can launch ICOs on it.
Well,
and
yeah.
Also do nothing.
Yeah, actually, I was talking with someone today about the difference between, or what they like more as an investment vehicle in 2018. Do they like Bitcoin or Ethereum? And I think that there are a lot of people that really like Ethereum. I'm not too up to date on what's happening from a tech standpoint, but my understanding is Ethereum's working on a lot of exciting stuff this year. We've got Casper. I know that they're looking to make strides. But one of the things that's kind of nice for Bitcoin compared to Ethereum is no one's really positioned to kind of go after the segment of the market that Bitcoin currently operates in, which is actually decentralized store of value, right? Nothing else in this top whatever is anything close. And we've seen a shift from projects. I remember back in the day, Cheat, when people launched projects, there weren't pre-mines, there weren't people-owned tokens, there weren't people. It was you wrote the code, you deployed it, and if you wanted to be legitimate, you didn't have a pre-mine. That was how it was.
Back in the day, if you had a 1% pre-mine, like I was not investing in alts in 2013 or whatever, but my understanding is back then, if you had a 1% pre-mine, the mob was after you for how greedy you are. Now it's just like, hey, we're selling 10% of the public, 90% of the founders. Good luck. And like you said, it's just an ERC20 token. They don't actually have anything there yet. So yeah, it is pretty crazy.
Right. Yeah. In some ways, that actually legitimizes Ripple. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Because back in the day, it was like that. I remember if someone, like, the word pre-mine was, I don't know how to describe it, but it was one of those words that if you heard pre-mine, you knew to stay away from anything with a pre-mine.
Yeah, you had to. There's a lot more coins trying to compete on their tech alone, and I think that's when you saw. I mean, that's when stuff Litecoin came out in 2013, right?
I think it was only a year after Bitcoin. I want to say 11 or maybe 12, but I could be wrong. I think.
Okay, and then like Monero, which I believe was originally called something else, maybe, and like yeah, so they launched with these very fair launches, not giving the founders a bunch of money for whatever reason. So and yeah, that's ideal, right? You want coins competing on the tech alone, and not people incentivized to work on those because they want the tech to be better, not just sit on a pile of money they got for just announcing the coin. But I think there was so much demand for these coins that just became not important anymore. There's just so much demand for a new coin that we saw go from no pre-mine to okay, 1%'s okay, to these days where minority of supply is released to the public. That's how people want the cheap hot alts, man.
They really do. By the way, some of the fans here have brought this up. Litecoin was founded in the fall of 2011.
Oh, okay.
So it was like maybe not even a year after Bitcoin.
Okay.
But to go back to the Bitcoin and Ethereum, how I think they're going to do this year. It's tough. I really dislike ever making like just straight up predictions because it's so easy to be wrong. And I talked with one of the other bigger YouTubers in the crypto space recently, And they said, man, like when you talk about something and it goes off, like you're a hero, but when you talk about something and it bombs, like everyone hates you. And so that's why I
Trayvon
just
James probably just like couldn't believe it. He was really venting to you.
who?
Trayvon James.
Yeah, it was Trevon, me and Trey. But the thing is, that's why you kind of just have to say, this is what I think from a tech standpoint. This is what I like about what's going on. This is about like the space, all these kinds of things. But like, no one knows where price is going. If someone's like, guys, trust me, it's going to double this year, they're lying. No one knows. No one knows what's going to happen in the market. Things change so much every day. Legislation happens every day. You don't know who's getting into it, leaving it. You don't know who's manipulating the markets. I mean, you just don't know any of this stuff. So I'm never going to just say that, you know, this is going to do that, is going to increase in price, right? I'm not going to say those things. I do feel a little stronger about Bitcoin's prospects this year than Ethereum, because I think Ethereum is going to have to deal with some competition. Neo is coming up, man. Neo's been doing a lot of things right. I think from a marketing perspective, they do a good job. My understanding is that the technology is in some ways better than Ethereum. So I feel like when you have multiple coins, you know, and really almost companies here vying for these spots, when there's competition, there's really only so much market share to go around. And so I could absolutely see Neo taking some market share from Ethereum. What I also do want to say, though, it's kind of amazing to me that the overall size of the decentralized application market, how big it is, given the lack of apps or DApps that exist on it. You have this huge market for decentralized applications, but where are the applications? We got like CryptoKitties and what? That's it?
Well, I mean,
Maybe another one, cheat.
I think there's probably some gambling platforms. I mean, in their defense, like I do, in a sense, agree with you that there's all this promise for all these things are going to be built, and we don't see anything. But on the other hand, like, you know, I be consistent, and that good engineering takes time, and you know, a lot of these projects maybe don't feel they have something that's viable for commercial use yet, and they're still developing it. Uh, I think we will see like good technology come out on Ethereum eventually, but at this date, I don't see anything. I can't come up with something that I think is that, you know, necessarily interesting or valuable.
Maybe that I'm echoing again. What happened here? Are your speakers going?
Yeah.
Okay, testing. All right, it's gone now. I don't know what that is. Yeah, I definitely think that this is an interesting kind of competition developing in that space. I look forward to seeing what happens. I do think that Ethereum, you know, I still like it. I have a lot of Ethereum compared to most other coins, but I do think that they're going to have a little more competition coming up over the course of the next year. All right, so going back to talking about the decentralized aspect of Bitcoin a little bit here. So what do you feel in terms of like the upcoming projects, the fact that people are no longer, they don't seem to care as much about the centralization aspects? You know, that really was a pillar of the cryptocurrency world, was decentralized, was not allowing people to have this control. Do you worry about how powerful cryptocurrency is making certain people, certain actors, and then the choice that they can decide, the decisions that they can make? And as a follow-up question, let's talk a little bit about Ethereum versus Ethereum Classic, because you know, when we started talking about cryptocurrency early last year, you know, basically got me on board with the Ethereum Classic train. So I was like, that's it. This, like, ideologically is the correct thing to do. And I bought a bunch of Ethereum Classic with my Bitcoin, and then I had to watch while Bitcoin tripled and Ethereum Classic did nothing. So
I wrote it down with you, man.
you're gonna have to answer that question for me here today, Chief. But anyway, so what are your thoughts on that aspect of decentralization? And then maybe let's talk about Ethereum Classic.
So I don't think people can gain that much power. Like, what I ultimately care about is Bitcoin, and I don't. There's nothing, because of the way Bitcoin is designed and because its, you know, properties are so carefully maintained. I don't see anyone from like some centralized altcoin becoming so rich and powerful enough to be able to do anything. And you know, I think you could observe this with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Roger arguably one of the most influential and richest people in the space, and he was able to use that to, you know, run up Bitcoin Cash's price so much. But ultimately, it still sits at, you know, 15, whatever, 14, 15% of Bitcoin's price today, its market cap today. And that's, you know, with the kind of their supply there. I don't know if it necessarily should be counted the way it is, but I don't see these, because of what Bitcoin is. Like, I don't see these people being able to affect it. And like we discussed, you know, people can be, the market can be, you know, irrational in the short term, in that people could not value the decentralization properties and just value flashing lights and stuff. But um, when that when those characteristics are tested, it'll be too late for them at that point. You know, once a coin's network or this blockchain can be taken over by an attacking third party, like you're not going to be able to be like, oh wait, okay, hold on, you know, future coin's about to die. We're gonna go decentralizate. We're gonna be decentralized now. Like it's too late at that point. You have to design these systems so you're prepared for anything now, not for when, you know, for lack of a better word, when shit hits the fan. Lack of a better phrase, when shit hits the fan. So you know, people can develop these platforms, and you know, maybe for a lot of them, centralization is okay. You know, if a private business is using some blockchain for its, or some other cryptocurrency for its service, like, I guess they're fine with centralization. You know, it's their thing. But at that point, I wonder why they're even using a blockchain. Like, databases, SQL databases are faster and cheaper. Um, so yeah, I guess, you know, after rambling for a bit, to answer your question, no, I'm not concerned.
To talk about the blockchain versus for file storing and that kind of thing. I talked with somebody who is an expert in just digital file sharing and deals with the servers, and actually had a company in the space. And he was like, these things are just going to fail, because even if it sounds great in practice to have everything decentralized, the accessing of that information in like a reasonable time frame is just not going to be something that's legitimate. Which, by the way, brings me to my other cheap alt you got me involved in, MadeSafe, which also went extremely well for me, Cheat.
Okay. All right. MadeSafe. So MadeSafe, you don't have a MadeSafe poster, do you? MadeSafe, I think what they're trying to accomplish is great. And, you know, from what I've heard, when I've read, they've been trying to do this since before Bitcoin. That's how long MadeSafe has been going on. But it's a really, really big thing to accomplish. And I would say they share the same principles as a lot of Bitcoin developers and members of the Bitcoin community. Is they just want to make sure everything is engineered as safely and secure as possible, and they have no concern about rushing it out to the market. I don't think they have that big of a team, but their goal is to make this decentralized internet and not have to face problems in the future. So, you know, honestly, for the stakes that high, I say go ahead. You know, you guys can take your time, but I'm no longer a MadeSafe back holder as a result.
Do you think, though, when you have projects that are trying to take however many years it takes to do something, that it's justifiable to look at values? Like, I haven't checked the MadeSafe market cap in a while, and obviously market cap has some inherent flaws. But some of these projects are worth $300, $400, $500 million on paper and are years away from doing anything.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
What is going on?
Well, two things. First off, I think people compare market caps in cryptocurrencies to what they understand as traditional market caps too much. It's not the same. You know, supplies are constructed differently. You know, it's not like you know, if MadeSafe is, let's say, $100 million market cap. I don't know what it is. I would just guess it's around there. If they are $100 million market cap, you're not supposed to evaluate them as like a business that's worth $100 million, you know, at its discounted present value. It's you know, that's just what those coins are traded for, multiplied by the supply. That's all it is. So you see these market caps just get like all over the place. So I don't really read too much into them anymore, unless there's something that had a fair launch, like Bitcoin, or had a fair launch like Litecoin. That then you can look at those market caps, and they're fair. Those are the result of individuals acquiring Bitcoin, by mining it, by buying it, maybe receiving it, and then buying and selling it. And that's, maybe not all the supply is traded anymore, but everyone made a voluntary decision to partake in that supply. And economic activity, resulted in that supply. Whereas these other coins is just like we talked about before, keeping 80% for the founders. Like, that's not, they didn't buy that. Maybe people would argue they bought that with their labor, but I don't know. White papers aren't worth, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, I might counter with this though. When you look at Bitcoin, how much of the total supply of Bitcoin out there are in, original wallets, are in, accounts that people had from the get-go, from the first few transactions over the course of the first year, and then we never saw them move again. We don't know if those accounts are being held and just waiting, or if people forgot about them, or if they lost access, or all of these different problems that could potentially happen to those accounts. And if that's true, then the circulating supply of Bitcoin is actually a lot lower than what the actually circulating supply is a lot greater than what it says the circulating supply is.
Yeah, I think Financial Times did an article on this where they tried to estimate the amount of coins that are, lost forever, or the amount of coins that are actually being traded. And the answer to that is ultimately there's just no way to know for sure, because the anonymity in Bitcoin isn't as strong as maybe many people might think it is, because you interact with any type of service or merchant where your name is tied to your actual identity is tied with that merchant, then reasonable blockchain forensics can determine that you are the owner of those coins and trace them around. I think companies, there's already companies that are doing work like this, so I don't assume Bitcoin is valuable. But people who maybe accumulated Bitcoin in 2009 just by mining it on their computer and never touched it, they have that anonymity. So ultimately, there's no way to know for sure what coins are actually lost forever. Probably a good amount, or how many coins people just continue to sit on. And it's their individual right to choose to do that. The users have sovereignty. If they just want to sit and hold forever, they're free to do that. We can't really just assume that those coins are gone forever. So I would say Bitcoin's market cap is fair because you cannot say for sure, you cannot say for certain about the activity, the access to all the supply.
Sure, but that's like I think a pretty weak argument to make, to say that because you don't know for sure, then we're going to count them as all in circulation. I think that it certainly stands to reason, if we have a bunch of big accounts that have not moved anything since the get-go, that a sizable portion of them are lost, or the person died, or whatever, because the chance of people just sitting on that amount of money for this long, I just don't think that makes any sense. Look.
Sure. Yeah. You're right. That's definitely the case. I'm not disagreeing that we can assume some supply is gone forever. There's probably millions of coins that are gone forever. But my original point in market caps was that it actually took economic activity for those coins to exist in the first place.
Okay.
And other altcoins, it's not the same. They just throw around supply how they see fit.
I see what you're saying, but it also does seem like a little bit of a semantic argument of, hey, they were traded through the free market. And so true, that's true. But at the same time, if they're out of circulation, it's kind of like the end result is not the same, but sort of similar.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but yeah. That's a fair point. I can't argue with that.
All right, so let's move subjects here. Let's change gears. So I know that you started working with Riot, I want to say 6 months ago or a year ago or something.
Started in October.
Okay, so you started working at Riot in October. You want to talk a little bit about Riot's up to these days, what you guys do?
Okay, yeah. So I joined Riot as an advisor back in October, and at that point, Riot was changing from a drug company known as Bioptics into a company known as Riot Blockchain, and uh, instead of sticking with a business that wasn't going well, it changed focus to investing in Bitcoin and other blockchain-related businesses. Riot. The goal wasn't to uh, build Riot Coin or build blockchains or whatever. The goal is to simply give investors exposure to the Bitcoin and blockchain industry. And when I was first found out about it, and I thought it was a great idea because, as far as I know, Riot is the first Nasdaq listed company that focuses exclusively on Bitcoin and blockchain related businesses. And something I've heard all the time with Bitcoin, or the industry in general, people say, I believe in blockchain technology, or even I believe in cryptocurrencies, but I'm unsure about Bitcoin, or I'm unsure about this. Custody of cryptocurrencies is difficult for a lot of people. So this traditional finance vehicle gave public investors the opportunity to get exposure to the industry, like I said, through traditional vehicles, through the stock market, not having to just like buy Bitcoin themselves. So, Riot started off with an investment in a leading Canadian exchange called CoinSquare. And I thought that was a great way to start off the company's portfolio, because you have a business that's, I would say, blockchain agnostic. It's indifferent to what cryptocurrency succeeds. They can just trade whatever, and that's why exchanges are, increasing in valuation so much. When Riot first invested in CoinSquare, which I believe was in September, was before I started working for the company, that Riot got a 10% piece at, I think, a $28 million valuation. And the latest post-money valuation of CoinSquare is about $430 million. So, quite obviously, the whole industry has been booming huge in the past 6 months, and especially exchanges have seen such a great run-up in valuation, because they're just making fees, people trading no matter what's being traded. So now Riot has a 12.5% stake in that, and that's, I think, a great investment for the company to have. So Riot, continuing from there, has invested in a variety of different blockchain businesses and has been focusing on building its own mining operation. Currently, Riot has 8,000 Antminer S9s, which is the leading mining hardware at the moment. Hoping those will be up pretty soon. I believe the majority of them should be running by the end of this quarter, and the rest running by the end of second quarter of 2018. It's a lot of work, building out these mining operations. I know as an individual, I had built my own GPU mining operation, and I started that as like, oh, I know, I'll just buy some video cards and plug them in, and I'm just going to be making money all the time. And I discovered it's a lot more work than that, especially when you start to scale up. So there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of work, and trying to secure a facility, and trying to secure facilities and have the labor in place. Well, I mean, we have to acquire the hardware, the labor in place, so that the facility built out correctly. You need cooling. You need power dispersed correctly. You don't just plug these things into a wall. You need to have the transformers. You need to have long running power agreements. No good for a company to just sign, like it would be like getting a mortgage with a variable interest rate, and who knows what's going to happen for there. trying to build a long-term business here. You need to make sure we're going to put this much money into building this infrastructure that our power costs will be good for some amount of time. So there's been a lot of work developing that. And in addition, a bunch of other businesses, I mean, a variety of other businesses that Riot's invested in. TESS, which is a blockchain for settling payments between telecommunications all over the world. My understanding, there's a ton of fraud, and there's a ton of high fees, and even small carriers in countries all over the world settling between each other. So TESS Pay is developing a solution for that. I think that addresses a real issue, and that'll be strong. And then also Verity, which is provides cryptocurrency accounting and audit technology. It's a new industry. It's not easy for a lot of people for traditional auditing methods to work, to verify ownership, come up with tax obligations. So I think that answers a real problem there. Recently, there was a U.S. Marshals auction for a bunch of Bitcoin, and Riot acquired 500 Bitcoin from that auction. So we hold that. And lately, we've also been working towards opening an exchange in the United States, which I think is super needed. There's like 2 exchanges in the United States. Robinhood, I guess, is coming soon. You can count as an exchange. Maybe some other ones you could kind of perform a similar service. But I think the exchange industry needs a lot more competition. I've been really disappointed with a lot of the things Coinbase has done, as we talked about earlier. And what was the news this past week? Apparently customers are being double charged. They were blaming Visa. Visa says it was them. I don't know what's going on there. So
originally Visa said it was not them, and then came out like the next day and said it actually was them.
Okay. Well, yeah. At any rate, I think there's a strong opportunity in the exchange business. So Riot has a letter of intent to acquire a CFTC licensed brokerage, and we're hopefully be able to launch an exchange. There's a lot of regulatory frameworks to go through to get to that point. I would like to see Riot launch this exchange and be a strong competitor in the industry and foster the relationships we've already made to make that happen as quickly as we can.
So I'm echoing again. Damn it. Why does it do that every so often?
I don't really hear it on my end.
It just starts echoing. Okay, I think it's gone now. In the issue of full disclosure, I would like to be straight up with my audience. I do own some Riot shares. I bought them at $40, but I do own some Riot shares. So obviously take it with a grain of salt here today on what we're talking about. But I just want to briefly talk about this because, I saw this article from CNBC on Riot, and it's weird when someone puts out when the media puts out a hit piece on somebody, and I actually know the people. I know you, I know Jason Moe, I know John O'Rourke at least a little bit, and then to just see this CNBC and then we showed up and he was like this, and then he was shifty looking, and then they got the cameras and John's trying to just be like, hey, I'm busy. It just really showed to me the power of what if the mainstream media, and I hate using that term, but if the mainstream media has an agenda that they want to go after someone, they can really just try and tear into you, by putting together a story that fits their narrative. I also want to say, though, I don't think Riot handled it completely correctly. I feel like there should have been a more clear statement made. I definitely don't think that some of the back and forth from that article made Riot look very good. But at the same time, it's just so weird. I know these people, and I know they're trying to do good things, and then you just have this just complete hit piece put out on CNBC, and it just crashes the stock's value, and you just see stuff like that, and it's weird because we always feel like cryptocurrency is the Wild West, but this is this happened in the stock market. This happened to a blockchain based company, but at the same time a company, right? And this you can have this type of attack put out legally to cause that kind of change in the price of shares. It's kind of ridiculous the change or the effect that can have on the cost of the stock.
See, what I see is happening here. So, like I said, Riot was, I believe, the first NASDAQ listed company focusing exclusively on, blockchain related businesses. And the goal of Riot was to invest in other businesses and to build its own mining operation. The goal of Riot was not to develop blockchain chains or anything like that. And I think you've seen in just 6 months, I think Riot has accomplished a good amount. I think any objective person can verify and see what the assets are. It wasn't like Riot changed its name and did nothing. There's been a lot of stuff that's been done here. And what happened was, after Riot entered the industry with its CoinSquare investment and name change, a handful of other companies were like, oh, wow, maybe we'll add blockchain to our name and our stock will go up. And that happened with I think it was like Long Island Iced Tea, Kodak. Like, people tried this, and as far as I know, they haven't made a significant. I believe they both have made some effort towards entering the mining industry. I don't know to which extent, and so I kind of feel like, for whatever reason, a variety of media outlets or just independent people wanted to target Riot and act like that's what Riot was doing, just changing its name and cashing in the stock. And I mean, that's not what has happened at all, right? Changed, to the benefit of the investors in Bioptics. Riot saw a new opportunity, had the opportunity to invest in CoinSquare, saw the promise in this industry. Probably like, I don't think it's far-fetched to say that Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain technology will be like the most disruptive thing we will see in our lifetime. Like, somehow we thought it was going to be the internet, but actually it's going to be this thing. Maybe you can argue it's a little bit different, but revolutionizing money is pretty big.
I'm going to go ahead and go the internet over cryptocurrency. Not that cryptocurrency isn't huge, but without the internet, there's not
possible. Actually, it is possible without internet, but a different discussion. But it's extremely important technology. So I think it was a great decision for the board at that time to change the focus of the company into this industry where there's so much opportunity, and to the benefit of the shareholders, and give people this exposure to the industry that they wouldn't always want to get. Like I said, I've heard so many people say like, oh, I believe in this industry, but I want to invest in the companies. Well, you can't necessarily invest in all these companies. They're not publicly traded, but Riot is a company that is traded, and it holds investments in these other companies. So I think it offers, it's not the same as buying Bitcoin, but it does offer investors an exposure to this industry. But it's still, this industry is very volatile. So Bitcoin price is volatile, and businesses that interact with that, with Bitcoin and other currencies and technology, they're going to experience the same volatility as well.
I noticed the volatility as I lost $30 a share. But what's it been like? What's it been like, I guess, having to see, what's it like seeing like a hit piece on CNBC as like a person, and you're working in this company and you're trying to do these good things, and you see that? Like, what's the reaction for you like?
Honestly, the reaction is, and it's honestly just a subset of what I've seen in cryptocurrency in general, or poker. Like, so in the two things that I've been involved with heavily in my life, I've been poker, computer science as well, but media just never can get that very right. But poker and cryptocurrencies, and I've seen so much reporting on these topics, and it can be so off sometimes, and it makes me question the news I read about every other thing. And I'm just like you. I don't like saying like, oh, the mainstream media, oh, they're all lying, don't trust them. But like, okay, I'm not an expert in, let's say, like foreign relations and like defense and stuff, but I read articles about them, and I kind of like try to get information and construct my beliefs around that. And if the media is as inaccurate there as I see them in the way that they report about, Bitcoin and other stuff, the way act like Riot's just like doing nothing, when it takes 5 minutes to look at SEC filings. Like, I don't know, man. Like, it makes, I feel like I can't like really trust media coverage of a lot of stuff unless I'm really getting into it myself. That's why I like Jimmy Song's, advice. Jimmy Song's, not advice, but you know, his position. He's like, I just don't follow politics. I don't care. Like, I'm just focusing on Bitcoin and stuff. I like it, man. We just stick to what we're good at and we contribute to the world that way.
I'm not sure I totally agree with that though, man. This actually kind of segues nicely into another topic I want to talk about today. The government's going to make some decisions eventually. Right now they're kind of kicking the can down the road while they figure out like what an internet is, but like they're gonna kick the can and they're gonna keep kicking the can, and then eventually it's gonna be like, okay, we got like craziness in the ICO space. The chairman of the SEC was gunning for ICOs in that Senate hearing. We've got just a really revolutionary growing industry. The size of that industry is huge. We're seeing more and more scams come out of left field and just rip people off. I mean, my God, the scammers in cryptocurrency are out of control right now. Twitter is insane. Every single person who tweets something, who's anybody, then in their comments, it's a tweet pretending to be them that gets upvote botted, and then spam responses. So like if Vitalik tweets something, underneath it, it's like Vitalik with like a period at the end or an I instead of the L or whatever. And it says like, send ETH here, I'll send twice as much back. And then it's 20 responses like, wow, got ETH so fast, thank you. Wow, double back, amazing. Like there's all these like obvious like bots just tweeting back. And that's just on Twitter. I'm seeing people replicate my accounts on Twitter, on Instagram, via email. There are people emailing, pretending to be me all over the place. I saw one today. It was like, all right, guys, I'll do an ICO review on my channel. I'll do a secret ICO review for you. Send 5 ETH here and I'll do it. But it's really important that it's a secret because on my channel, I try to be legitimate so that we have to keep it between us. I'm like, man, that's especially fucked up because like now if someone thinks that's me from like a publicity standpoint, it's like, wow, look at this email we got Doug Polk just like trying to shill some ICOs. Like not only is it's just so harmful for everyone. And I got kind of sidetracked here, but with all the stuff going on right now, the government's eventually going to step in and make some types of laws. And I know that there are a lot of people like Jimmy Song or you to some extent as well, who are like, whatever, I'm going to focus on the Bitcoin and technology. Well, that's great. And that's what really, I think really matters long run. But it's also important to take into account that what happens in our government with these cryptocurrencies will play a major impact on both their value and the longevity of these currencies to be used here in America. Look, man, I say this all the time. I was a professional poker player, and one day the US government said, you're really not anymore, and made my job illegal. Boom.
Suddenly we're in Canada.
One day I woke up and the US government said, Doug, GTFO, bud. It's been real. Oh, by the way, we'll still take 40%, so you can leave, but you better ship it on back. Like that happened to me. I woke up and I had to leave the country to continue my career.
Such a bad day. I could not believe it
Yeah, that was a bad one. So I look at that, and then I look at cryptocurrency, and I see all these people like, oh, this won't happen to Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you can't stop Bitcoin. It's immutable. Sure, that's true. You can't stop Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the future. They're not going to do that. Guess what, guys? You could wake up tomorrow and there could be a vote or some like law put into place or some presidential action or whatever happens in our government. They can absolutely ban it. I do not think the chance that they ban it is even like super tiny either. I'm not saying it's like 50%, but 3-5%, I don't know, something like that they could just decide that this is drug money and just want to ban it entirely. Don't think that the government's going to act reasonably. And then also don't undervalue the effect that could have on the overall markets. If the day comes where the US government just decides, you know what, we're going to make Trump coin and like Bitcoin's donezo and like it's illegal to own a Bitcoin in America, which again, I don't think is likely, but is also not impossible, right? Not impossible. That's going to have a drastic effect on the market. And that's actually one of the main reasons that I think it's good to have a balanced portfolio. Again, not a financial advisor, is that there are risks. There are risks in cryptocurrency that aren't even the ones that you think about day to day, but more even ingrained into, or rather it risks by governments themselves. So that day could come. The government could decide, you know what, we're going to make it illegal. That doesn't mean I think Bitcoin will fail. But what it does mean, I think there will be a drastic short-term price change. I think that it'll be a huge roadblock towards the success of it long run. And I also think as a U.S. citizen, look, man, like I love Bitcoin, but if like it becomes illegal to own a Bitcoin in America, I'm not going to own any Bitcoin, right? What are you going to do?
I mean, I was going to disagree with you a little bit, but the way you ended it there, it all sounds pretty reasonable. You know, governments historically have not, I mean, at least the United States, have not really been able to ban things. I think there's a difference between making things illegal, making them disappear. Sure, they can make Bitcoin illegal, and it would have a short-term negative price impact. But I think because of the way of what Bitcoin is and how it's designed, it would continue to exist long-term. So, I mean, there's some probability of what you're describing happening. And, you know, I'm the same as you, a U.S. citizen. I'm not going to break the law, you know, just because I love my Bitcoin so much. So I hope that never happens. But I think what we saw from that hearing is a pretty encouraging attitude from regulators. Now, you know, these are not the end-all, be-all of the government. You know, there's lots of agencies, lots of people more powerful than them that make decisions. But, you know, it's really encouraging that CFTC chairman is like a rock star in the cryptocurrency community now.
Which is amazing. Which is amazing. By the way.
His Twitter follower, he went from like 3K to like, I think it's 30K now. Like, is so popular. People loved him. And he gave, like, it really was just a super reasonable, respectful attitude, which was, you know, I see a generation of people that are excited about this. And if they see value in it, we should give them the opportunity to explore that. And that's what free markets are. And I applaud anyone, you know, encouraging that behavior. If it turns out to be bad, then yeah, the investors will have to unfortunately lose money from doing so. But, you know, it's at their own peril. And if they, I can see the other, I think it was the SEC chairman who argued more for disclosure from these ICOs, not necessarily Bitcoin. Like, you know what Bitcoin is, you can look it up. You know, a lot of these ICOs maybe should be disclosing a lot more about what they are, and maybe exchanges have a responsibility to provide that information to people before they're trading those things. I don't really know about that. But I thought was funny is I believe a senator asked the chairman, when was the last time you bought a bond? And the chairman was like, oh, well, I mean, before I had this job a few years ago. And the senator asked, well, did you read the prospectus to see what's in the bond? And he's like, I don't know. So, I mean, I don't know how much these things ultimately help, but I think for a market to function efficiently, consumers should at least have the ability to inform themselves.
I think that maybe not right now, but as cryptocurrency continues to grow, I do think that it's going to be important to have people, you know, in our government that care and will help make effective legislation that doesn't stifle innovation, and who can understand it. You know, senators like Mark Warner, who, you know, had really great things to say about Bitcoin, and he knew what Ethereum was. I was like, man, there's a senator who knows what Ethereum is. That's like, I wouldn't have expected that.
Respect those bags.
So I think it is important that at some point that the cryptocurrency community realizes that, you know, you kind of do need some representation. And I know that might not be what Satoshi would have wanted. I mean, he never even, you know, told the world who he was. But, you know, having representation is important in the context of the global ecosystem, and also in the context of trying to further the platform of really, you know, any community. And that's really what cryptocurrency is. It's a community of people that believe that we should have financial freedom from, you know, third parties, and we should have, you know, money governed by math instead of people. Mm-hmm. But without having people there to further the cause and help get effective legislation that can protect people, but at the same time does not, you know, limit what we can do in the space, I think that's going to be important, not just right now, but in years to come. Bitcoin's not going anywhere. It's not like Bitcoin's going to be, oh, we'll talk about it this month, and then, I guess we will worry about it in 2040. Like, these conversations are going to become more and more common. I mean, think about your life day to day. How much of your life day to day is spent talking cryptocurrency now?
Like 100%. Like, I just wake up in the night, like, thinking about segregated witness. Like
100%. Now imagine what it's going to be in a few years.
yeah, you're totally right. That's why I think we have to applaud the efforts for nonprofits like Coinsetter, which they focus on informing lawmakers and representing the cryptocurrency community in that platform. I read that before that hearing, they were just all over the place, like talking to people, trying to get the message out, and I think that's great. And I applaud efforts, and I encourage people, if that's important to you, you should support these efforts as well. Even if it seems fruitless, people can always write to their legislators, and let them know what you're thinking. Let them know if there's an issue at hand that's important to you. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the future is for regulation in Bitcoin, and I think that's a big thing that suppresses price a lot. And as all the government action was hitting the headlines through the end of December and January, like that's where we saw this big price decline, right? Like, South Korea is banning Bitcoin, and oh wait, China, we banned it, we're banning it again, and like, oh, there's this Senate here in the United States of people are always really worried about what regulation will come, and I can't tell you what that will be, if it'll have a positive and negative effect on the industry at all. But that's like, it's a very common criticism I hear from people who are skeptical about Bitcoin is, oh well, the government's just going to ban it, so who cares? Well, all right, well, I don't think so, but no, I think that's at least what stops people from having increased interest in it. People who are unfamiliar with the technology, at least.
I have a lot of friends, especially some of my older friends, who just refuse, like you. No, I mean actually old. Okay. Actually, no offense to them. But coming from poker, right? And poker has a decent amount of older people, but primarily I think the player pool usually is around 21 to 35 for most people, and then obviously a lot of older people as well. I see a lot of the younger poker players jumping in, ready to go, believe in it. They see the opportunity, but I think for a lot of the older generation, they just look at this like, oh, it's jeopardizing the U.S. financial system. And they're not wrong. This is jeopardizing to some degree the domination of the financial markets that the US dollar has.
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point, there absolutely could come a day where the government's like, you know what? This is kind of becoming a threat to the way that we operate. And guess what? Bitcoin is a threat to the way the US dollar operates. It is. So are they going to embrace it and try and join it, or are they going to try and control it, make it illegal? And man, I just have so little faith in our government to do the right thing. Like so little faith. They've already made one job illegal. Why not make the second, right? So I don't know what's going to happen when that point comes. What's the government going to do? I think that's certainly an interesting question, and frankly, a legitimate concern for people that don't want to get into Bitcoin.
Yeah, so you asked me to say one nice thing about Bitcoin Cash earlier, and now I'm going to say one nice thing about Roger Ver as well, is that he said that his goal, and then there's a little nuance required here, but his goal was to grow Bitcoin as fast as possible. So it was so big to where if a government tried to do anything, it'd be too late at that point. And I think I kind of think that's where Bitcoin is now. I think in its earlier days, it would have been a little easier to squash, although, imitators could have come out and learned from that. The cryptocurrency is probably coming no matter what. The degree to which this network has grown at this point, and I'm not just talking about the peer-to-peer network, I'm not just talking about the miners, but like the fact that the community behind it, the developers behind it, the business accepting it, I think it's an extremely difficult, if not impossible thing to stop at this point. So, you know, he was kind of right in that regard. On the other hand, I've heard arguments that it could almost be bad to grow Bitcoin too fast. I believe Gregory Maxwell made that argument before, although I don't remember the details on it. But I think the point is that it would grow too fast, that it would lose a lot of the properties of censorship resistant that make it valuable. Little tangent there, but yeah, I basically going back to the law thing. I think the way where cryptocurrencies are right now and the benefits that people see to this distributed ledger technology, it's hard to imagine it's going anywhere. But you know, you never know what a government's going to do. You never know ultimately, and that's what makes it so risky, and that's probably why a lot of older people don't really want to mess with it. You know, young guys like you and me, you know, we can, you know, take a little bit more risk, you know, put a little bit of money in there, whatever happens, happens. But if you are, you know, inching up towards retirement, you don't necessarily care to risk that just to like get some cheap hot alts. So, you know, I think people have different risk profiles as well. And I think in order for people to justify their action, they kind of come up with this criticism that might not always be accurate, or they just repeat stuff that they just heard from someone else, and kind of ends up like that.
Right, tulip bulbs. All right, so let's talk about a couple. Let me ask you this: are there any alts that you like what they're trying to do that are up and coming that you either have invested in or you haven't, but you like what they're doing? Is there anything?
The alt I like the most that's out right now is Wax. And while their mainnet is not yet completed, I think the industry and what they're trying to accomplish is huge. The virtual item trading in video games is enormous. And I actually, like, I knew it was big, and then I saw what Wax was trying to do. I saw Wax was partnered with Opskins, and I looked into what that business was. And I could not believe, Doug, people are buying like $3,000 guns every single day for CS:GO.
Bro, I know.
I know a lot of it. You know, it's crazy to me. And so this industry is so big, and I see a real demand for having a platform that's kind of agnostic to the games that developers can connect to create marketplaces without having to, you know, make their own payment processor. We're making a store. We got to deal with customers. Like, we can have Wax provides a blockchain solution to have a marketplace for these, for have an exchange of goods. I think scarcity can be verified. You know, users and, you know, businesses can participate in the consensus of the network. And I think that addresses a real concern. So I'm excited to see how that project develops. I think their goal is to have their main network up towards the end of the year. But just the fact that you know, they're partnered with Opskins, which is a huge player in this industry, I like to see where they're going there. It seems like an interesting project.
You know, it's funny, man, because before I started Upswing Poker, my poker training site for you guys that only know me from crypto, I actually somewhat debated doing something in the gaming skins
we
space.
talked about that in Vancouver.
Yeah, so this was actually my first business idea that I'm glad I didn't end up going with. But basically, so I had a bet a few years ago for you guys that know what Counter-Strike Global Offensive is. And I had a bet to get to Global Elite, which was like the highest ranking thing. It's like 0.5% of the people get it or so. Not that in any way makes me remotely good at the game. But basically, you know, I was playing every day. I was looking at these skins people had and like how high the demand was, and there was a marketplace. And, you know, I realized that there was this problem where you couldn't get skins into money. Basically, you couldn't resell the skins for money because it was against like site terms of service. And so there's like this fundamental problem with the way the liquidity works, where people can buy these skins, but then they can only redeem it for like in-store credit, and really you're limited in the way that you can move those items. Now, I did not have an idea to create a token for that, which, you know, I actually think was a fairly brilliant solution to the process. I kind of debated ways that maybe you could work within the industry, and ultimately couldn't figure anything out. But when I heard about Wax, you know, it just made sense to me. It solves a problem. This industry is huge. And so I'm very interested to see what they had to do. Also, I always note this: I do own some Wax, although I do own less now than I did before. So, yeah, I'm interested.
on the spirit of disclosure, I also own some wax. This is not investment advice. You know, investments are risky. Wax, don't. It's risky. Not investment advice. I don't know. I don't have the shtick down like you.
Every day, the same shtick. This channel is for information, entertainment.
I'm only giving you guys information and entertainment. Okay.
There you go. All right. So what else? Any other coins that you think have a lot of potential, or that you like what they're doing, or maybe from a tech standpoint?
I think a lot of the privacy coins have good demand. So I think, you know, well, Monero, I think, has been is a really good project with smart people working on it. The privacy they achieve is pretty strong, and I think that's a good project. I also like Zcoin because they use like a more traditional method, more traditional cryptography, like not fancy new stuff like Zcash uses, which might be good, but it's difficult to understand. It's difficult to use. It's not 100% proven. And if there was what?
Are you talking about ZK snarks?
Yeah, ZK snarks. Yeah.
Can you explain what ZK snarks are at all, or is it too confusing?
No, I mean, no, I could not tell you what they are. And I think they asked the lead developer of Zcash what ZK snarks were, and he didn't know either. Like, he couldn't fully explain it. It's an extremely difficult thing.
All right, I'm all in.
Yeah. So, if there was some sort of problem, a vulnerability there, you can't even audit the supply with Zcash. You wouldn't know. Zcoin, on the other hand, uses tried and true cryptography. It uses its setup was based on using numbers from a RSA factoring challenge back in like the 70s, I believe, where no one even knew about cryptocurrencies back then. There'd be no reason to believe that there's any backdoor in the cryptography there. Whereas my understanding, while I'm not an expert on it, Zcash's setup has some questionable components to it. I believe they're going to be doing a new setup, but I like Zcoin using. People might have guessed already from talking about Bitcoin, is I like the tried and true technology. I'm open to trying new things, but I think when money is involved, it has to be very, very careful. And especially if you're talking about privacy money, because you have a whole new thing that needs to be preserved in order for that coin to retain its value, properties that users want to use it for. So I like what Zcoin's doing there. They recently switched to hybrid proof of work, proof of stake system. So
I didn't actually know.
Yeah.
How many other coins are doing that?
So many coins are doing it now because they see people FOMO buying coins on an exchange so they can run a masternode and then they can get returns from that. So I kind of feel like I see a lot of coins now trying to quickly become masternode coins to incentivize exchange behavior there, and I don't think that's right at all. But
I might argue. I'm echoing. Why? Testing.
You
guys in the chat hear that? Testing. All right. I don't know why it does that, but I'm good again.
I'm just going to turn my speakers down a little bit.
Sure. So I actually think that there are some good things about masternodes. So it depends on the way that the coins are built. Obviously, for the ones where that was part of the game plan, they help facilitate transactions and increase the security of the network. But I also can see some value in there being people that are more committed to long-term holding of the currency itself. I feel like for the token economics ends up being a good factor because you have people incentivized to be long-term holders. So I'm not saying that if you have a masternode, it's legit. I'm not trying to say that, but I do think that there are certainly some upsides to having masternodes as part of your network.
I think that proof of stake has not necessarily been proven to be safe yet, and no one really knows how to do it in a secure way. And I think you can observe that by the fact that Ethereum keeps pushing back its hard fork to proof of stake. I guess it's no surprise now that I'm a big Jimmy Song fan, but Jimmy Song has a video talking about proof of stake. I think he put up a couple weeks ago, and it talks about how you aren't really getting the same security as a proof of work network through proof of stake. And I think what people latch onto, like he says, is they see the last step as requiring less energy, which is running the masternode, but they kind of ignore a bunch of stuff that can happen before that point that does not provide the same security as proof of work. I mean, proof of work being miners running hash functions to find blocks. So I don't know necessarily. I think there's obviously a lot of people working on this. I think it's an open problem. Maybe one day people will find a solution, but I'm not really convinced in the security of proof of stake yet. Especially just like what you mentioned, like you have people who are long-term committed to the network running these masternodes, right? Well, all you have to do is acquire currency to run that masternode. You don't necessarily have to buy it, right? You can hack someone, you can coerce someone to give you currency. I see ways where this system can be co-opted. Whereas a proof of work, like you basically just need to acquire a ton of miners that get a ton of space and a ton of electricity, and it's very difficult to do that. And once you got to that point, you might as well just be mining Bitcoin trying to make money anyways.
All right, so let's end here on a question that it's going to be my go-to question, I think, for at least a little bit here. We might change it to something more positive, but okay. I'm going to ask you, out of the top, let's just say 20 cryptocurrencies by market cap, which one would you say is your least favorite and why?
I am bringing up the list real quick. Oh man, so many to choose from.
By the way, also notable today, Tether coming in at number 20, so it's in play.
Tether's useful, it's really held strong through these volatile times. Bitcoin goes down, like Tether just holds in there.
I also have to say about Tether, man, and again, I own no Tether. I don't know why people think I'm just shilling Tether for some reason. Like, it helps me in any way. But like, I just feel like, I'm a fan of free markets too, maybe not to the same extent as you. And despite nonstop constant fear about Tether coming in from all angles around the clock for a long time, it trades $1. Except when Bitcoin drops a lot, then it usually goes over.
Yes, I mean, I think that's a compelling argument you can make. Tether's traded, so if holders were that concerned about it, they could trade it for dollars on Kraken, I believe, maybe other exchanges, if they wanted. And if anyone's interested in more learning about Tether, BitMEX research, BitMEX being a futures exchange for cryptocurrencies, they have a research department. They put out a ton of great articles, and I don't have a link, obviously, but if you look at BitMEX's research on Tether, I think it's very informative. They look into, how it was formed, what it is, where they store US dollars and stuff. I think they give a pretty good overview of that subject. But and not everyone's got to get it. I think every podcast needs a quick Tether mention these days. People just love Tether. And God, another thing there's so much misinformation on is I was talking to some dude and he's like, "You think Tether's good? BitMEX just issued Tether when they got hacked. That's how they made up for the hack." I'm just like, okay, we're talking about different things here. It's not what happened. There was a bunch of different stuff going on. They issued Bitfinex tokens. It was socialized losses, and my understanding is Bitfinex tokens have paid off handsomely, which is how successful that exchange has been. Tether was another product launched to address something different. Whatever. Anyways, so back to this top 20 and what I don't like. I hate to be unoriginal, Doug. I love being original, but I just got to go in there and say Ripple. Like, I don't think people have any idea what they're buying. I think Ripple technology that the banks can use for settlement between each other, that can have some promise, but people need to understand that's not the same as holding the XRP token. The XRP token does not give you meaningful exposure to that business. Now, I think Ripple is trying to launch a new product that maybe uses that somehow. I believe XRP is used for fees, but you're not like, guys, like, Bank of America is not going to start like market buying your Ripple at $100 so they can send money to Wells Fargo. Like that's not how it works. So, do your own research, really look into what XRP the token is, not Ripple. Look into what XRP the token is and the utility that token has before you decide to buy or if you want to hold.
I think I read something recently that they can actually freeze XRP.
Oh yeah, there's 35,000 blocks from the Ripple blockchain that's just missing, from the XRP blockchain that's just missing. Hey, who cares? They control everything, so we don't need to know where all that money went or what's going on there. I think BitMEX Research also did an article on Ripple, maybe. I'm not 100%. I think so, but yeah, there's that's not. It's a very centralized system. Okay, I know they can send money. I know you can send Ripples real cheap to each other, but that's I don't see that Ripple. I don't see sending XRP tokens back and forth as a meaningful payment future, because you guys have to keep in mind you can already send dollars that way. Banks can just update databases. Like there's already apps for doing that. You can buy Bitcoin with Cash App. You can send US dollars back and forth to people. Sure, it doesn't settle, for 100% right away, but for all intents and purposes, that's what you're doing. So why do I have to buy XRP tokens to send back and forth to each other? It's not. I don't see that being a future.
I think the title for this podcast for the video might be Jason Les hates Ripple. No. And it'll just have you and I'll like Ripple and like an X through it so that people know you don't like Ripple.
Wrestling that like Ripple logo, like not you again.
Yeah, I know.
You're centrally controlled and the founders have the supply. No.
All right. Well, I want to say thanks for coming on. And,
oh yeah, dude, it was a lot of fun. I hope we can do it again sometime, somehow. It would be awesome.
Yeah, we will for sure. You definitely, answered some of the questions that I had, and good to get a view of what Riot's actually up to these days.
Sure.
And I'm sure I'll have you on again at some point. But for the people that just found out who you are today, where can they follow what you're up to?
So on Twitter, I am at Hey It's Cheat. That's spelled CHEET. You can also just search for Jason Les, LES, and I'm on Instagram in the same name. So yeah, follow me. I tweet out stuff. I think that's important. I follow. A lot of what I do in crypto, I feel like sometimes is just keeping up with Twitter and finding smart people to follow and just like get an idea of like what a lot of people are working on and thinking of. So often retweet like other people who I think have really important messages or making good points, asking good questions, etc.
Yeah, actually, I always tell you, Cheat, that you don't tweet enough.
I know, dude.
You just cherry pick like the really good jokes or like.
I'm like in the basement crafting these tweets like very carefully. Like they're running on the treadmill. Like you got to get ready. We're gonna put you on the timeline.
Right, you just got to get in the mix. But anyway, yeah, I want to say thank you once again to Jason Les for stopping by here today to talk about Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptocurrency space. All right, what do we got coming up for the pod? So at some point here, I'm still working with Charlie Lee to figure out when we're going to be doing that podcast. Hopefully next week, maybe the week after. No timeline on that eventually. But I want to reach out and maybe get a little bit of a different take. We've had a couple real Bitcoin bulls on here for a couple weeks in a row. So it would be nice to get maybe someone, maybe an Ethereum developer, if anyone would like to reach out to me. Maybe we could get someone from one of the other projects that I like. I want to try and get a good perspective of different views from within the industry. I think it adds a lot more credibility to the podcast, but also it gives you guys an idea of what different people are up to. Because even though I think I generally side more with the Jimmy Songs and the Jason Leses, I also think that there are a lot of important viewpoints that need to be heard. And, you can certainly make some arguments as to, what are the most important things in cryptocurrency. It's different to different people. And maybe to a lot of people that especially gotten earlier, it's about more of the decentralization, the store of value, the security. And then maybe to people that are newer, it's more about the innovation. It's more about trying to solve huge problems that haven't been solved yet. And there are certainly many currencies out there trying to do that. So anyway, I want to say thank you again to Jason Les, as well as the audience today. You guys are awesome. Thank you for stopping by for our first podcast on the new channel. Hit the subscribe button if you're new. I'm going to try and do this once a week. We'll see what ends up happening. But for now, that is the game plan. So hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's content. And I'll see you guys again soon.
Peace.
Peace.